any other.
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks. Thanks for joining us. We've got the latest coming up on stories developing all over the world. And we'll start with the headlines of this Monday. Amid widespread protests, the Sri Lankan Prime Minister resigns. A curfew is imposed and the military is called into Colombo after Mahinda Rajapaksa's supporters clash with protesters. 2 people are dead and over 100 injured. Russia holds its annual parade marking the Soviet Union's role achieving victory over Hitler in World War II. President Putin announces no new initiatives but blasts NATO, accusing the military alliance of creating an unacceptable threat for Russia. Also commemorating victory over Nazi Germany in World War II, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He said today his country will win its war with Russia and not surrender any territory. Three security guards were killed after gunmen opened fire at a polling station in the southern Philippines. Millions there are voting in the country's presidential elections. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is the front-runner in the race to succeed Rodrigo Duterte. Shanghai's long fight against COVID-19 unravels into chaos and desperation. The city's residents scuffle with officials. Workers storm factory gates, demanding an end to lockdown. And at least 48 people were killed by gunmen in 3 villages in northwest Nigeria's Zamfara region. It has been terrorized for years by criminal gangs. We begin today here in the United States, where the Democrats will today begin efforts to force a vote in the US Senate on Wednesday. They want to pass a national abortion rights law in an 11th hour bid to protect a woman's right to choose as it faces threatened assault by the US Supreme Court. The process on Capitol Hill is doomed to fail, even though last week a leaked draft decision signalled that the US top court is preparing to overturn Roe v. Wade, the landmark 1973 ruling that has kept abortion legal from coast to coast. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called the leaked draft an abomination. He said he would force a Senate vote on enshrining the protections offered by Roe into federal law. Those protections are threatened by the conservative majority on the Supreme Court, who now seem set to overturn them.
I tell you that it is too late.
We are here today because we are not going to let a bunch of extreme Supreme Court justices or extreme right-wing politicians take away the rights of 100 million American women. We are fighting the fight to preserve women's rights. So today I'm detailing my plans to hold a vote Wednesday to codify Roe into law. I will file cloture, which moves the bill tomorrow, and we will vote on Wednesday, and every American will see how every senator stands. They can't duck it anymore. The Republicans have tried to duck it.
But Democrats know there is little chance of success this week in the Senate. The blocking power of Republicans will play a key role in the evenly divided 100-seat body. The legislation would need 60 votes to pass, and it isn't going to come close. The vote will nonetheless put lawmakers on record regarding one of the country's most polarizing issues. Republican-controlled states have been taking steps to restrict abortion rights in recent months. And if Roe versus Wade is struck down within the next few weeks, each of America's 50 states would get to make and enforce their own abortion laws. Polling on abortion is complex. A report by the Pew Research Center found that 8 in 10 Democrats support abortion rights in all or most cases. That's more than double the 38% of Republicans who do. But majorities oppose abortion completely in at least 7 southern states, and many Republican-governed jurisdictions are already preparing so-called trigger laws that will snap into force, heavily restricting abortion or outlawing it completely the moment the Supreme Court acts. The southern state of Mississippi will ban abortion except in cases of rape or incest or danger to the life of the mother. The state's Republican governor, Asa Hutchinson, who said he is considering running for the presidency in 2024, said rape and incest exceptions will continue to be part of the debate on abortion. The Arkansas governor also called for directing more resources to maternal health services.
We want to increase the services for maternal health, to increase the services for adoption services as well. And so we want to invest in those areas that will help those women with very difficult circumstances of the pregnancy. But secondly, I think to your point, the rape and incest exceptions will continue to be a part of the debate. Right now, we do not have rape and incest as exceptions under the Arkansas trigger law, but I think that will be a part of the debate.
Just to underscore, Asa Hutchinson is the governor of Arkansas, not Mississippi. According to another Pew Research Center poll, about 61% of Americans believe abortion should remain legal in all or most circumstances. In Washington, D.C., abortion rights supporters continue to gather in front of the Supreme Court building. It is now ringed by a security fence to protect it. They're protesting against the leaked draft opinion. For more, let's go across to WION's correspondent in New York, Susan Tehrani, who joins us now live. Susan, I am struggling a bit to understand the point of this vote in the Senate. I mean, first of all, we know it cannot succeed. There's no prospect of success for Charles Schumer and the Democrats. But secondly, it's not exactly a surprise as to where Republicans stand on abortion. There's not going to be some moment of great revelation here when Republicans oppose the law. So what exactly are Democrats trying to achieve with this move?
Right, exactly. And as you mentioned, Simon, it's very unlikely. Everyone knows that this is not going to get passed at all in Senate. But however, people like Chuck Schumer and Amy Klobuchar think that there will be some sort of success, and this will be a first step to the ballot box for many Americans. But the problem is the Supreme Court is not on the ballot box. And it's very hard to see 6 months down the line whether or not they'll be able to continue to have this gain momentum on abortion. And this vote, albeit failed, will really have that kind of effect that they want on Americans, considering the fact that, as you mentioned, polling is extremely complex. There's a tapestry of opinions on abortion across the United States, and the majority of Americans right now, when polled, inflation, gas prices, crime, those are higher up on their list, even among Democrats, than an issue like abortion. And when it comes to limits on abortion, at least some sort of limits, Amy Klobuchar said that, we're going to get women on our side and the men that support them. And this bill, although it will likely fail, will be a first step to the ballot box. The women will see, who stands where. But the majority of women across the United States, when polled on multiple fronts, blue and red states, women support some sort of limit on abortion. So we'll see whether or not this backfires or not. But I think in a nutshell, they really think that this will be a first step, not only for the issue to continue its momentum after that illegal leak, and then it'll ultimately move on to the ballot box. Whether it'll be a victory for the Democratic Party or not, it's yet to be seen.
Right, but why take this first step now? I mean, if you spin back to the presidencies of Barack Obama or even earlier, Bill Clinton, at various times in their two presidencies, they enjoyed substantial majorities in Congress, and they absolutely would have stood a much better chance of getting a law like this passed then than Joe Biden and Charles Schumer face now. So aren't the Democrats opening themselves up to the accusation that they are trying to slam the stable door shut long after the horses have bolted?
During the Clinton administration, the Democratic Party had a somewhat unified stance on abortion. Their stance basically was abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. It was a sort of centric policy. This was Clinton's policy. It was that's where, we see a lot of sound bites come out from Joe Biden, where now you see him take an extremely progressive stance. Some of it has to do with the changing nature of the Democratic Party. It's gone so far to the left that many even Democrats can't really identify with that. That when we come to the Clinton administration, that's, you can talk about that. On the other hand, the issue of Roe from the very beginning was built on shaky grounds at the Supreme Court. It wasn't really, abortion wasn't a constitutional issue, so they had to sort of stick it into privacy laws. That's a whole other conversation, and that's why as Supreme Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wasn't even comfortable with it. So they really didn't want to touch the issue of abortion. When it came to Barack Obama, he had to struggle with a Republican Party that wasn't really supporting his health care plan. So he had to sort of push back. And even Barack Obama, because he knew that abortion is such a touchy subject in the United States, he started to launch initiatives like the faith-based initiative at the White House, which actually called for the reduction of abortion. He also, in 2010, signed an executive order to ban federal funding for abortion in his health care bill, unless for issues like incest or rape or other issues. So you see that even these Democrats, they weren't so far to the left like Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden today as they were. They weren't really comfortable with this conversation. Blame it on the nature of the country at that time, blame it on the political circumstances or not, but they didn't want to touch it, and perhaps they didn't think that they needed to. As one might say, desperate times calls for desperate measures. Perhaps this is a time they think that abortion is the winning ticket right now in the midterms, and that's why they've decided to open up this door, as you mentioned, and see where it goes, because they really don't know what else to run on at this point.
Right, but Republicans, of course, also think it's the winning ticket and think that the Supreme Court's apparent readiness to act is going to energise their supporters just as much as Democrats hope that abortion rights activists will be spurred to back their candidates. Susan Tehrani, live for us on the streets of New York City this morning. Thanks very much indeed. We are going to stay in the United States now. A majority of gun homicides and assaults involve illegal weapons. And where do these guns come from? How do they get into the hands of dangerous people who then too often use them in acts of violence? Well, some alarming new research finds that in cities that report data to the FBI, gun theft from cars is now the largest source of stolen weaponry. It's taking place alongside rising rates of gun sales. At least 180 cities reported an increase in gun thefts from cars from 2019 to 2020. The research was conducted by a non-profit called Every Town for Gun Safety. Its study analysed crime data from over 9 years in more than 270 small to large cities across 38 states. The key findings show that on average at least one gun is stolen from a car every 15 minutes in America. Thefts from cars divert guns away from the legal market. The report also claims that a decade ago, less than a quarter of gun thefts were from vehicles, but that proportion has now risen to more than half. The research suggests the country is witnessing its biggest spike in gun thefts from cars ever, in unison with spikes in gun sales and homicides, and also the speed of crime gun recoveries. It suggests that cars parked at residences, in driveways and outside homes are the most common source of stolen weapons. The highest number of gun thefts from cars occurred in the city of Memphis in Tennessee, with nearly 200 guns stolen for every 100,000 people. Other cities with high rates of gun theft include Chattanooga, also in Tennessee, Charleston in South Carolina, and Warner Robins in Georgia. Gun thefts from cars have been trending upwards for much of the last decade, but the sharpest increase occurred at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic back in early 2020, when gun sales and violence notably spiked as well. In the decade prior to the pandemic, an average of 13.5 million guns were sold annually, but in 2020 that number jumped to 22 million. Experts say the shift is exacerbated by many factors, including a surge in firearm purchases during the pandemic. As for possible solutions to prevent the rise in gun thefts, some of them could include secure storage laws, lost and stolen reporting laws, public awareness campaigns, and devices that make it easier to store guns securely in cars. States must also pass gun safety laws requiring guns to be securely stored and not visible when left unattended in vehicles. States including California, Connecticut and Oregon have already taken those kinds of steps. Policymakers, local leaders, law enforcement agencies, community members and, most importantly, gun owners all bear culpability as the country faces calls to build public awareness around the issue. In his highly anticipated Victory Day speech, Russian President Vladimir Putin defended his decision to invade Ukraine. Speaking at the May 9th Victory Day parade in Moscow, which commemorates the Soviet Union's role defeating Nazi Germany in 1945, Putin said that Russia was facing an absolutely unacceptable threat in Ukraine and that Russian soldiers were fighting for their motherland.
В эти дни вы сражаетесь за наших людей на Донбассе, за безопасность нашей Родины, России.
Despite speculation, there was no major announcement during his 11-minute address. It offered no assessment of progress in the war and gave no hints on just how long the invasion might continue. Putin did reiterate some of his earlier justifications for the invasion. The Kremlin leader said that both NATO and Ukraine were creating unacceptable threats on Russian borders. He also alleged that the West was preparing to invade Russia, including Crimea.
Страны НАТО не захотели нас услышать. А это значит, что на самом деле у них были совершенно другие планы. Планомерно создавалась абсолютно неприемлемая для нас угроза. Причем непосредственно у наших границ.
The president also called for a minute's silence, not only for Russians killed in World War II, but also Russian soldiers fighting in Donbass, the separatist region in eastern Ukraine. Columns of soldiers marched across the cobblestones of Red Square, as they do every year, and armoured personnel carriers carrying intercontinental missiles were also on display. The Victory Day parade has traditionally been a day of national pride in Russia and across the former Soviet Union. It suffered the highest death toll of any nation in World War II. Up to 27 million Soviet citizens were killed in the war. Under President Putin, the commemoration has taken on an increasingly military tone, with Russia showing off its latest might year after year. Meanwhile, across the border, a defiant Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky maintained that Ukraine will win its struggle against Russian aggression, despite darkness returning to the country decades after the Second World War.
День перемоги над нацизмом. Ми боремось за нову перемогу. Шлях до неї важкий, але ми не сумніваємось, що переможемо. В чому наша перевага над ворогом? Ми розумніші на одну книгу. Це підручник з історії України. Ми б не знали горя, якби всі наші вороги вміли читати і робити правильні висновки.
After failing to capture the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, Russia is currently pushing its military into eastern Ukraine and has claimed control of the key port city of Mariupol on the Sea of Azov. Now, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been travelling again. He made a rare visit to the Iranian capital, Tehran. It was the Syrian leader's second trip in recent weeks to a major wartime ally since Syria's civil war erupted in 2011. During the brief visit, the Syrian president met with Iranian leaders in Tehran. Assad held talks with the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The two leaders called for stronger ties between Tehran and Damascus. Khamenei posted several tweets relating to the visit. One of them read, "The relationship between Tehran and Damascus is vital for both countries and we should not let it weaken." He added that ties should be strengthened as much as possible, while Bashar al-Assad was reported as saying strategic ties between Iran and Syria have prevented the Zionist regime's dominance in the region. By that, of course, he meant Israel. Iran's supreme leader also hit out at Arab nations that have normalized relations with Israel, saying while leaders of neighboring countries hang out with the Zionist regime, the people of these countries take to the streets and chant anti-Zionist slogans on Quds Day. Quds Day, of course, is when Iran holds demonstrations against the government of Israel and in solidarity with the Palestinian people. In 2020, under the US-sponsored Abraham Accords, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Morocco all normalized ties with Israel. That agreement broke decades of Arab consensus that there should be no recognition of the Jewish state in the absence of a peace agreement establishing a Palestinian state. Bashar al-Assad also met Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi during his trip. Raisi echoed Khamenei's statement that his government's priority is to strengthen strategic ties with Syria. Tehran is the closest regional ally for Damascus. Alongside Russia, Iran backed Syria in its more than a decade-long civil war. Iran's economic influence in Syria has also grown in recent years. Tehran has given financial and military support to the Assad regime throughout the 11-year war. It has also deployed forces in Syria at the invitation of Damascus. But Israel has mounted frequent attacks against what it has described as Iranian targets in Syria. China's sea levels reached their highest on record last year. Rising water temperatures, melting glaciers and polar ice caps are to blame. According to China's National Marine Environmental Monitoring Center, coastal sea levels were 3.3 inches higher last year than compared to the average recorded between 1993 and 2011. The report warns that rising sea levels had a continuous impact on the development of coastal regions. It has urged authorities to improve monitoring and bolster preventative efforts. Continuous rise in sea levels can lead to the erosion of coastal ecosystems and the loss of tidal flats. Temperatures of China's coastal waters fell slightly last year from the previous year, but it was still the third highest on record. In order to protect the coastline, cities along the country's east coast have begun making contingency plans. Shanghai, for example, which is China's commercial hub, is now looking into building new drainage tunnels and tidal gates. Now, Logan was living a life of constant abuse. He was kept under cruel conditions and at the mercy of uncaring owners. But all that changed when animal welfare officers received information about the Belgian Shepherd last year. Currently, Logan is undergoing training as an explosive detection job, and we are going to leave you today with Logan's extraordinary journey. Stay tuned to WION. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, for another edition of Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. You're with WION. World is one.
The incident took place at a rural residence in northeastern Hungary, where animal welfare officers rescued a tired-up, malnourished dog from his owners. Logan was then enrolled for counter-terrorism operations with the military. The Belgian Shepherd is currently undergoing rigorous training as an explosive detection dog for the Explosive Ordnance Disposal and Warship Regiment of the Hungarian Defence Forces. Logan is being trained to recognize the smells of around 25 different explosive substances while also undergoing socialization and obedience exercises.
Az biztos, hogy vannak nehézségei, nagyon kihívásokkal.
He certainly has difficulties in his training because of his traumatic background. I can't say that I'm training a brand new dog, but I'm pretty sure of the steps that I will have to take to get a full-fledged explosives detection dog.
As per the regiment's commanding officer, the increased use of explosives by terrorist cells made it important to use new methods for detecting potential bombs.
Detecting explosives was a challenge to which the military had to respond, and one of the best ways to detect these devices is to use explosive detection dogs. That is why since 2009, these four-legged comrades have been supporting the activities of our bomb disposal soldiers.
The commanding officer also said that Logan will serve as an inspector of important sites in Hungary and could be sent for NATO missions abroad. As per Logan's trainer, it is challenging to train rescued dogs due to their past trauma. However, he feels that Logan will be successful and make a valuable addition to the unit.
Many other
this is right, Arab.